Want more podcasts? Head over to gmg-podcast.com. Things at work kind of suck, and then it makes you really uncomfortable. And you spoke like, you were going home and you're extremely frustrated, and it was kind of like, it almost makes you not want to nurse or do whatever you do anymore, right? Did you get that feeling, that sense from other people in your hospital, but for some reason they just, they wouldn't say anything or they wouldn't speak out?
Very, very, very few. The only reasons they were actually scared to be at work, thinking, that they were going to be bringing something home to their families, and
Yeah.
it was stressful in a different sense for them.
Yeah.
Um, but there was maybe like three
Okay.
that I was with. Yeah,
So it wasn't like a prevalent kind of thought. It was kind of like everyone sort of bought into it, right?
yeah, exactly.
And which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because you're in a hospital where, science is supposed to be at the forefront of everything that you do. What is
Supposed
it?
to be.
It science is supposed to be, trust science, right?
Yeah.
But what is it like? How were they just not reading the same data that was coming out? Because like, I'm not a freaking nurse. I'm a kin by degree, but I'm a professional fighter. I am a martial artist. I know how to read studies, right? I went to school and I can pull up a set. Like, were they just reading the final conclusions, or like what was the education going into them making that decision not to kind of follow what's really happening with the data? Because all along the data, as you know, showed the opposite of what was being told to the public.
Well, that's the problem, right? Because they weren't reading it. They weren't looking at anything on their own. They weren't looking at the studies or reading the data or looking at it, or they weren't looking at Canadian stats of all cause mortality rates in the past several years, or mortality rates in flu in the past several years compared to what we were seeing. Like, they weren't looking at it. They were just going by what the government was saying, media was saying, public health policies. And they're just doing what they're told, as now I realize is what good nurses should do. Is just
don't que- don't
follow the orders, follow the policies. That's what.
don't question anybody. Just do whatever it's on the paper says to do, right?
Yeah, they trick you into thinking they're training you to be critical thinkers, but they're just training you to be indoctrinated and to think within their box.
Yes.
And it's very clever how they do it, because they make you think that you're independent and that you are thinking for yourself and that you are critical. But when that veil's lifted, you realize that you're just another robot that is taught to follow orders and do what you're told.
And from your